Welcome to the OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. In this podcast, we will be talking about some very interesting things. These will include manifestation techniques. These will include how a human manifests and the fact that we are sort of like mini creators. You know, in the Bible it says that we are made in the image of God. We are made like God. So, though we are not Him, we can manifest just like God can. We can create just like God can. Now, we may not be able to create entire universes, but we can create our own little worlds, our own little lives in this universe that we live in. So I'm very excited about this podcast because this is a life-enhancing podcast down to the very core. Kevin, I know that you are not only well-versed in manifestation, but you apply it to your life in such a way that you now have 3 separate businesses that you enhance other people's lives through. I know that you teach other people about this almost on a daily basis.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And as far as manifesting, the first principle, the first rule, is to be able to have a purified thought, to be able to have an authentic goal as far as where you're trying to go with your thoughts, with your mind, with your body, and with your soul.
If you were to check out, or if you already have checked out and listened to our previous podcasts that me and Kevin have done, that is called A New Way of Living. And that'll be found on our Sprecher page for A New Way with Noah. And A New Way of Living sort of goes through every single step you could possibly think of to settle into your authentic self.
To pattern and condition yourself to be able to lead the best life possible, to be able to have the best life possible, and then on top of that, to be able to then emulate that to other people while in your presence.
To sort of be that on a daily basis without falling back.
Correct. You're just falling forward into your destiny.
Falling forward, I like that. What are some meditation and or manifestation techniques that you use almost on a daily, weekly basis to enhance your life, Kevin, to bring about the best life for you?
Well, when manifesting and meditating, it's 2 different principles, 2 different techniques, but one source goal in mind, and that is to be able to have the most purified mind, body, spirit, and soul that one can, and envisioning mentally, physically then willing to receive, and then spiritually willing to be able to then grow your environment and those around you.
I know a lot of very well-respected teachers of manifestation will say that it all starts in the mind.
It does start in the mind, but how does the mind operate?
Well, mindfulness meditation particularly, is all about seeing all of your thoughts while they go through your head. And if you practice mindfulness meditation, then you'll know that they are almost in the thousands that go through your head in a small amount of time.
Correct.
There's tons and tons of thoughts that are looping through our head almost at all times. And mindfulness is all about settling that and sort of seeing that, letting them go through without getting stuck on one.
No, let me ask you a question. Have you ever created in your lifetime a picture board, a dream board?
Well, yeah, I've created charts.
Now, imagine or envision being able to have a dream board or charts, whatever it is emotionally, physically, and spiritually you connect with, being able to see those pictures, meditate on them, and then be able to actually experienced one day in flesh receiving that.
Mm-hmm. I don't even need to imagine that. I've seen it happen right before my eyes. I know manifestation is something that we are capable of, and that we have more control over what's outside of us when we have more control of what's inside of us.
Correct. But how do these things become real that were once thought?
Well, it takes application of being focused on what you want, to manifest.
So what you're saying is that if you're a bad person and do only bad things, you can still have a positive result?
Well, that depends on what you think of a bad result being, because a lot of bad people see a bad result as a positive thing in their lives.
So would you then say that it is all about speculation, or is it perception?
Personally, I believe that there is right from wrong. There's a difference between right and wrong. It's not all relative. I believe there is an ultimate right and wrong. So speculation, that's personal. That's an individualistic type of idea.
Right.
So no, I wouldn't say it's speculation.
Okay. So then you claim it the other?
What I envision is just a feeling. It's something that is sort of like an image in your head. It's visualization. It's, visualization is a major part of manifestation as well.
Correct. In both negative and positive.
Right. And so the things that you envision can either arise a positive or a negative feeling inside of you.
An outcome in circumstance, situation. But the bottom line is that which one is more long-term and which one is more short-term?
Ooh. Envisioning can be as long or as short-term as you want it to be, as can speculation.
Okay.
If you are stuck on something, if something keeps coming to your mind, even if you want it to stop, then that's pretty powerful. That's something that has control, I would say, over us. It has a somewhat bit of control over.
But do we take the time to be able to meditate on it and to be able to figure out what that actual message is trying to say, or do we just really consider it a nuisance and we just try to be able to avoid it throughout the day?
It depends on if it's positive or negative inside of us.
Whether it's positive or negative, how do you handle what is being given to you?
That's the key.
That's the key.
That's the key right there. How you deal with whatever it is, whether it is positive or negative. I like that.
Yeah, because there's a process. There's literally a unthought about process on how you go through this information to be able to picture it, to be able to then try to manifest it, or to be able to bring it into flesh to become a reality today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if your picture is blurred, unclear, unprecise, then your outcome is going to be the same way.
That's exactly what you're talking about when you use the word a purified thought.
Correct.
That's the difference between purified and unpurified. Fuzzy versus clear.
Correct. And so in order to be able to make that image clarified, you have to be in your thinking state clarifying what it is that is important to be able to bring forward into that focus or into that view, right?
Because if you're going off on mental tangents, then that still has control over you.
Correct, because it's an endless cycle of going nowhere fast, right?
Right, exactly.
So in order to be able to break that cycle, and you have to understand is that the reason why I'm calling it a cycle is because it only lives as long as you constantly breed it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what you need to be able to do is that if you want that ideal dream home, instead of just having any home pictured, picture one that is just slightly out of your comfort zone of what you would envision or imagine you receiving, to be able to, through natural law, if you're thinking right, if you're acting right and doing right, then would be able to come into fruition because you're literally growing that image while you're meditating on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so pretty soon flowers are starting to grow out in front. Pretty soon you're getting a white picket fence that wasn't originally there. Now you're talking about the shutters. Now you're talking about the siding. Now you're talking about the roof. Now you're talking about the windows, right? Going back to in a new way of living, I go over all those different categories. But what makes this scenario perfect and connects them to each other is that what you envision envisions you. What you meditate on meditates over you.
And what you manifest in your mind eventually will manifest in reality right in front of you.
Correct. Whether positive or negative.
That's right.
So it's important that in my daily walk, I ask myself questions in my meditation. Is this right? Is this good? And why? Who's benefiting? If it's a solo benefit, it's going to then have a solo outcome, unshared by anyone else.
Right.
So I've got to include, since I'm married, my wife in that picture. I've got to be able to include the children in that picture, right? I've got to be able to include family members, friends, and loved ones that I love very dearly, right?
That's another very powerful key aspect, because the things that you manifest, you can manifest them for yourself, but you can also manifest them in the lives of other people.
Absolutely, because when you bring them forward into righteousness or into the right train of thought, the universe, whatever you want to call it, God or a universe, sends that energy to them because you're thinking of them in that process.
It's a very literal sort of interpretation of your thoughts. It's a literal manifestation.
Absolutely. It is the seed planted part of the biggest picture of remote viewing.
I was going to talk about that because the remote viewing topic, I would say, or the techniques, is a very precise visualization. Like, as in you're visualizing every single detail of the world around you, down to the, the hair on your head.
Correct. Because every particle of every dot in that matrix picture matters.
Down to the little glisten of dew on your window.
Absolutely. So what you bring clarity to then clarifies you.
So in this podcast, do you want to teach us, Kevin, how to really manifest the purified thought?
You've got to be able to do a 3-step process, none more, none less. The first is you've got to have a unquestionable, unfathomable belief that you can manifest.
And that's a feeling.
It's a feeling, it's emotion, and then it's truth being given to other people unconditionally.
Right, because you can say in a positive affirmation, I believe I can do it, I believe I can do it, I believe I can do it. But if you're not feeling that, if you do not feel the empowerment emotion inside of you, then it's really not that powerful, is it?
Correct, because if you're not the living example of what you're trying to be able to then bring forth, then everything else is going to be just half that of what it can be or what it could be.
Your thoughts have no power, at least they have very little power when it comes to if they are not linked to emotion or if they are. If they are linked to emotion, they're much more powerful.
Please understand that your thoughts are the control center to your entity, to who you are, right? Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, right?
Yep.
And I can go on and on and on with all these different books, right? But the most important thing is that thoughts bring what matters into matter. The right thoughts bring what could never be into the actual flesh, the actual manifestation part of what is now.
And what I'm trying to say is that when you back your thoughts with feeling, they have more manifestation power.
Well, you got thoughts, feelings, and actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts have got to be the driving force to, what did I say was number 2? Feelings and actions, right?
That's right.
So your thoughts and your feelings, because I can feel happy all day long, but then if I'm not emulating it out, then it's false. False emotions, false expressions appearing real. Fear, right?
FEAR.
Right? So you've got to be able to do these 3 things. And it's simple, uncomplicated. People mess it up all the time. A pure train of thought leads to a pure train of feeling that leads to a pure action of accomplishment, right?
Right. So you can have a purified fear, though. You can have a fear that's clear to you because you've focused on it so much.
Correct.
It's still false. It's still a false emotion appearing real. It doesn't just, appearing real doesn't mean it won't manifest for anyone but you. It will manifest if you focus on it too much.
Let's just use this analogy. If you remember back in the 1950s when people used to put Reynolds wrap on their heads thinking that the aliens wouldn't be able to listen in on their thoughts and that sort of thing, people were literally starting to be able to believe in what other uneducated people were doing, thinking that that was real, right?
Yeah, but first they had to believe aliens were real.
Right.
And that they had to be scared.
Because it's a taught nature, not a trained nature.
It's taught by the world around us, though.
Correct. But it's taught to be able to emulate fear, because if you weren't afraid of it, you would probably be enhanced by it.
That's right.
And outside forces don't want you to get involved in that.
So when you dispel fear out of your being by purifying it with the clarity of why you don't have to be afraid, then that brings empowerment to your life.
It brings freedom to your life so that you can just be you versus a byproduct of someone else's teachings that puts you in that fear condition.
So another common misconception is that if you're completely focused on positive things, then that's always going to bring positive results. There are negative positives as well as there are positive negatives.
Correct. But the difference is the balance in that force, the balance in that emotional field, right? It's that there are some positives that are somewhat negative, but not draining negative. Just a personal letdown. Just a personal slight disappointment.
Right.
A not quite right feeling, right? Doesn't mean that it's bad. Doesn't mean that it's good. It's a good thing that you're learning from it, right? But it's not necessarily beneficial in the long run, right?
That's right.
So, in order to be able to curb that whole level of enthusiasm of emotion, you got to be able to understand its source and where it comes from. So if I started to get real emotional for some odd reason, and I wasn't up until then, there had to be a source to where that came from, an energy.
And a thought.
And a thought, right? And so I could have subconsciously, subliminally become connected to a thought that then transpired an action without my acknowledgement of it until it happened, right?
That's right.
And so it's a pendulum that goes back and forth, right? Now, how do you stop that pendulum from happening?
You got to find the balance.
Not only the balance, but you got to be able to know its source. Was I watching TV? Was I listening to music? What was it that put me in that state?
And one really easy example is you are feeling feelings of fear often, especially if you're like going up the stairs and you got the lights off in the house. After you watch a horror movie, you are fearful going up those steps because you're like, oh, something's behind me. You have that feeling. You know it's not real.
Right.
But you have that feeling just because you watched that horror movie previous when you would never have that feeling otherwise.
Yeah, same thing as walking into a dark room. Mm-hmm. But then no one ever asked the real question. Why do blind people not really understand fear? They're in constant darkness, right?
Yeah.
And so what does light or darkness have to do with the situation? It has to do with everything with your environment, right?
Right.
They are more tuned into their environment because that one obstacle has been removed from their life, the seeing part, right?
Right. And our seeing can be an obstacle, but it can also be a blessing.
It can. But the bottom line is that those people that are seeing impaired and then those people that are completely blind have two different perspectives on the same view of what you're seeing, whether they can see it or not.
So these two different perspectives
help you to be able to grow the balance of whether to be able to fear something or to empower something.
Okay.
Right?
Makes sense.
So, getting back to the simple three that I keep talking about, is first you got to be able to know the source of the information. You've got to be able to know why you're wanting to do what you're doing in the first place.
So are you saying that blind people basically know how to make the best out of a bad situation? What could be perceived as bad?
Correct, because they were removed from an option of being able to see something, right? All they have left is a heightened perception of awareness, and they literally can be able to see through energy radiating through their body that something is not quite right. They don't have to see it, but in their mind's eye, this is where I'm getting at, is that they can be able to start getting signals that we have become slightly detuned by, right?
That's right.
Because we can see, right? We can see if a bad person is coming our way, right?
Well, I mean, we can see them coming, but whether we know them as bad or good is kind of is based on how sensitive you are as well as how well they are at hiding it.
Correct. But I'm just using a normal, scary movie scenario. You're seeing a guy with a hatchet, coming at you.
Right, with a face mask on.
With the face mask on. And you kind of put two and two together without really thinking about it that, hey, maybe this is not the right situation, right?
Yeah.
But what if the guy that was wearing the mask was blind?
You would never know it, right?
Right? Maybe he was afraid to be able to show what was actually scaring him that he couldn't see. No one thinks of it in the reverse. It's always in the here and now and how they perceive something, right?
It's always in the here and now.
So, the bottom line is that you've got to be able to have a purified thought of what you're trying to do in the first place. Then from there, you're trying to be able to include those people that you like, love, value, appreciate, and respect in that vision. And then in closing is to be able to then, in that final picture, to be able to see you all celebrating, all cheering, all happy, being able to have you achieve that goal of whatever it is.
Envisioning the outcome.
But always understand is that when you bring other people forward, other people will subconsciously, subliminally start following you and wanting you to be able to receive that, right?
They'll be on your side because it's not only a positive manifestation for you, but it's a positive manifestation for them as well. And bringing other people into the mix, there's a reason the Bible says where two or more are gathered, in one place, then he's there also. Then
Correct.
Jesus is there also. Because where two or more are gathered, it's much more powerful than when there's just one.
Absolutely. But the ending picture is that the people that you bring forward win with you.
Right, and whether they know that you're envisioning this or not, subconsciously they pick it up. Subconsciously, they can pick that up that you want what's best for them.
Correct. But if you're living an authentic life and lifestyle, they're going to hear your words.
Right.
Often enough to where they start having dreams of being at this place that you've already envisioned.
So you can manifest things in people's subconscious. Our subconsciousness, to expand on that a little bit for the viewers or for the listeners that aren't well versed in subconscious versus consciousness, our consciousness only picks up a minute percentage of what our subconscious picks up. Right. Our subconscious is picking up every single little blip of information, 100% of the information that is given to us through our senses, our 5 senses, through our intuition, through our emotions, through every little thing that we feel, think, or perceive. Our subconscious is picking that up.
Where do you think deja vu comes from?
That's a profound subject, and I have no idea.
It's other people being able to have manifested the thought that created the environment, that created your environment in that moment. So what I'm saying is that, have you ever had deja vu?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
it's a weird feeling.
It's a weird feeling, right? But you feel like you've been somewhere. You feel like you've been to some place, right?
Even though you've never been there in your entire life.
Correct.
You feel like you have.
Somewhere in the
subconscious?
Well, not only that, but in the environment for which someone else was in, they were picturing or envisioning you being there as well. And through a process of authentic belief, then sent that information to you to where you are now in that environment going, wow, this seems familiar, but I've never been here.
There's an experiment that was done, and this goes right along with this, and it was done in the field of quantum physics, which we'll be talking about a lot on this podcast.
Absolutely.
And what was done is they had an experiment to do with just single particles, and it was 2 single particles. And this experiment is called the twin photon experiment, and it was conducted by Dr. Nicholas Gissen of the University of Geneva in Switzerland and his colleagues. And in this experiment, he took 2 photons of light and he separated them to 7 miles apart from each other. I will be reading from a link in the description that you'll be able to find and actually read up more about what I'm talking about right now. So Dr. Gissen sent 2 photons along telephone wires, and when they reached the end of these telephone wires, the 2 photons were separate and about 7 miles apart on each end of the city of Geneva. The 2 photons were forced to make random choices between alternative and equally possible pathways. Classical physics predicts that independent choices bear no relationships to each other, and that these 2 photons would not have any relation in the choices that they made on these equally possible pathways. So the paths of the 2 photons were properly adjusted, and the results were compared to each other, and it ended up that the 2 photons matched. There was no physical way for them to communicate with each other. No physical way. And what Albert Einstein calls spooky action at a distance was proven to be a real thing. So the magic of quantum weirdness is a very real thing that science is still trying to come to grasp and understand. So to sum it all up, these 2 photons, which were relating to one another, were separated to 7 miles apart. And when responding to a stimulus, they both made independent decisions that were identical with one another. And this couldn't have been possible unless they were relating to each other in some way. And, classical physics, again, would predict that their independent choices would differ from each other. And each and every decision that these photons made, each and every way that they responded to the stimulus was identical. So this is showing that two particles at a distance can relate to one another.
Let me bring a closer example home. How many times have you heard that a mother had a sixth sense about a child that had gotten hurt or injured?
That's exactly what this is explaining. That's exactly what that is.
Correct.
It's without any time needed for this mother to get that feeling when their son or daughter is affected. That mother can feel that.
Right.
In certain cases.
So if that can happen on Earth, what do you think, or how do you think God feels when he goes through that with you?
One of my favorite Bible quotes is Romans 8:28. And this goes along with the entire what we've said in this podcast already. And it quotes, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, and for those who are called according to his purpose." So if that tells you anything about the nature of God and how a negative can be turned into a positive instantly, depending on our perception of that event, then that'll show you like the nature of God is indeed good.
Absolutely, because when you forgive yourself for the environment for which you've been raised in or put in, then you start to be able to understand the environment that is blessed or given to you by God. Mm-hmm. You create your own environment from the time of your creation till the time of your death.
Yes, and on top of that, a group of people creates an environment as well. That's why when you walk in a church that is very electric, and it is electric because energy is electricity. If you walk into a place of worship or some lighthearted environment, a positive party environment, then you automatically start to feel a little lighter. You automatically start to get a little more positive mindset, and it happens quite often.
Right, but that's purpose of intention.
Within the group, yeah, for sure. Not necessarily the person walking into the environment.
The reason why you walked in there is because you connected with the environment.
I see.
The people come second.
I see. And if you don't connect with it, then you're going to walk out pretty soon anyways. And it makes a lot of sense.
Listeners, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but if you're not connecting with your environment, do you stay in that environment or do you go elsewhere?
Right, exactly.
Right? So it all has to do with resonating thoughts, feelings, and emotions, right?
Mm-hmm. You can either keep rejecting something that's positive, or you can keep rejecting something that's negative if you're in a positive thing too.
Correct.
Positive state. Or you can convert to a more positive way of living, or convert to a more negative way of living. That's why when you're in the presence of an angry person who's shooting anger at you, they're pinpointing anger directly at you, you can either stay positive and eventually settle them down with your own positivity. Otherwise, that person is going to walk out, or you're going to get angry yourself, or you're just going to walk out on them and keep being in a positive state of mind. You know what I mean?
Correct, but you have only scratched the surface of it. But the bottom line is that in order to be able to change an environment, you have to be able to forgive the person or the people that created it in the first place.
Yes, compassion is a big key too.
Because when you forgive people that don't know what they do, then you then can change the environment from within.
And it's a lot easier to forgive people when you understand, the energy that you put out is what you receive.
And or if you end up doing it right, it can leave them as well. It doesn't have to come back to you tenfold. It doesn't have to be able to have this uncanny boomerang effect.
Right.
So, some people get so caught up in other people and following other people that they forget to be able to know that they're a person too. True story, right? People can get lost if they don't have the right train of thought, the right train of empowerment, the right train of knowing emotionally, physically, spiritually what's right and what's wrong. So in meditating, you've got to have a purified thought. You then have to be able to include others in that meditation. And then third, you got to be able to completely and wholly believe that what you're manifesting is going to come true for the good of not only you, but those that you've brought forth with you, right? Mm-hmm. So for those people that meditate to be able to have a great day, that's a soul journey because it just is you. Not everyone's going to have a great day. Not everyone can have a great day. Mm-hmm. It's just law of attraction. It is what it is, right?
Right.
So when meditating, you need to be able to meditate not only on your word, but God's word as you are picturing what you're wanting to be able to then have come into completion into your life.
Right. So it's not enough to wake up and just say to yourself, this day is going to be great. This day is going to manifest great things. Because you have to have something envisioned.
More importantly, God gave me the ability to wake up. Today's a great day. Now, what else can I do other than wake up today?
Mm-hmm. Even if it's 5 minutes into the future or 5 hours.
But, again, I'm breaking it down simply because we're not even thankful that we got up in the first place. We talk about our aches and our pains. We talk about, the time that we get up, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I don't want to go to school. Oh, I don't want to do this later on today.
Yeah, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do anything, right?
So imagine if you were to wake up and whatever you had planned for that day, whether it was to do nothing or to do tons of things, imagine if you were to envision those things going in the most positive track you can. Then later on when you're there, actually manifesting that in real time, what you had envisioned earlier in that morning.
And as you get better at it, you end up completing it in the same day that you thought of it in the first place, not needing anything else to linger into your tomorrows. And that's really important.
All right, so I think we've left our listeners off with some awesome tips on how to manifest their best life, and I urge all of you listeners to go and listen to our previous podcast, A New Way of Living, if you are curious how to emulate and be the most authentic, most powerful soul, manifesting the best results in your life every single day.
Absolutely. And understand that what you think, you become. This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.